From regrettable angles to outright stupid creative decisions for brand new members of the roster, to insulting and even offensive pieces of television that shouldn't have been aired, and much, much more. Let's have a look at the absolute worst things that WWE has done since the year 2000, shall we? I mean, you clearly want to, that's why you clicked on this video. So I'm Gareth, this is What Culture Wrestling, and here are the 50 absolute worst things WWE has done in the 21st century so far. Could probably add to this list in another couple of years. Number 50, imposter Halloween outfit Kane attacks, 2006. WWE has been sporadically obsessed with doppelganger warfare for a long time. In 1994, The Underfaker temporarily replaced The Undertaker and set up a SummerSlam clash that almost bored people to sleep. And bizarrely, it was supposed to be even longer than it was. But Bret and Owen Hart went over their allotted time inside a steel cage. Thank God they did, eh? Approximately 12 years later, creative recycled the idea for Taker's kayfabe brother, Kane. Yay. He'd unmasked and turned into the bald, psychopathic horror movie character who burned testicles and set announcers on fire by 2006. So some fans were actually missing the classic mute masked man of yesteryear. Well, good news, he was back, sort of. It was actually Luke Gallows in an unconvincing mask, wig, and Halloween outfit combo who attacked on the 29th of May 2006 episode of Raw. That led to a singles bout between real and fake at Vengeance in June. And the real deal actually lost that scrap, but then kicked masked Kane into touch on the following night's flagship. Meanwhile, fans wondered why the promotion really thought a repeat of Undertaker's clanger of a story from the mid-90s was gonna fly with them. Like, this was not a successful gimmick that WWE was just trying again or anything. It was crap. Gallows was nowhere near as imposing as the original Kane had been when he first started showing up in 1997. He was a cold, almost mechanical monster. But this version was like someone's gangly uncle had decided to delight the kiddies by showing up to little Johnny's 10th birthday party as the Big Red Machine. Side story, I used to actually get paid to dress up as Peppa Pig for kids' birthday parties in another life. I was the Big Pink Machine. Anyway, here's hoping WWE shelves such doppelganger stuff in the future, hey? Number 49, Bayley's This Is Your Life with Alexa Bliss, 2017. Speaking of repeats that played before diminishing returns, actually, no, that's not true. Alexa Bliss running a This Is Your Life send-up on Bayley during the 29th of May 2017 Raw wasn't just a case of diluted interest because The Rock and Mick Foley had beaten them to the punch in 1999. No, it was a segment so foul that even latter-day Vince McMahon ribbed Triple H about it during the pandemic-era TVs in 2020. Just think about that. The dude responsible for some of WWE's worst content thought This Is Your Life sucked. It did, but yeah. This is 2020 McMahon we're talking about. Coming entries will make it clear how incredible it is that he was willing to rib anybody about anything. Poor Alexa too. She had to stand there and run through some of the weakest material known to man as fans yawned their way through the whole skit. If this was supposed to be funny, then the real joke was on WWE for thinking that the interminable quarter hour would remind fans of the Attitude Era's peak. It did not. Bliss feigned shock and surprise as she brought out phony folks from Bayley's past and tried to ridicule the girl next door babyface for her formative years and career up until that point. It was all just awful. Truly awful stuff. And worse, This Is Your Life 2 droned on and on and on, and was part of a story that saw Bayley refuse to use violence because she was too nice. Remind people again how this was supposed to get anyone over. Number 48, that weird karaoke Clash at the Castle finish, 2022. It should be written into promotional law that karaoke is henceforth banned from broadcasts. Make it so. There was a dire segment involving the women's division on an episode of SmackDown mid-pandemic that saw everyone from Naomi to Lacey Evans sing iconic entrance themes, and that was bad enough. But at least it happened during an era when WWE scrambled to fill TV time with anything they could think of in front of the Thunderdome screens. It was a dark time. Clash at the Castle 2022's conclusion does not have that excuse, folks. There, after losing to Roman Reigns in a heated main event, one Drew McIntyre drowned his sorrows with boxer Tyson Fury via the medium of music. Their single going along completely baffled fans in attendance at the Welsh Stadium show, largely because it felt totally out of place. How did McIntyre go from failing to defeat the tribal chief to crooning Don McLean's American Pie and the Oasis hit Don't Look Back in Anger? This was the kind of thing punters expected to see when walking past a pub shortly before closing time on a Friday or Saturday night. You know the feeling. Woeful singing starts spilling out of the bar's front doors as fellow patrons with earache try to escape and head home to safety. Unfortunately, despite the good intentions, this just made a mockery of Drew's heroic push to end the bloodline and was highly unnecessary. Instead of being fired up about Solo Sikoa's debut and interruption in his title tilt, McIntyre was content to pal around with Fury, singing a few verses as knackered fans filed out of the venue. I was one of those fans that night, and I will never forget hearing Drew's voice outside of the stadium and thinking, what the hell is happening? Look, that was a pretty terrible live experience at a WWE event, but I want to know what's your greatest one, if you've got one. Like, what was a really good or amazing thing that happened that you watched or just happened to you at a WWE live event? Let me know in the comments, why not? Number 47 introduced the 24/7 title as a hardcore knockoff 2019. Even beloved icon Mick Foley looked like he knew the 24/7 title was a bad idea when he introduced the wretched-looking thing on the 20th of May 2019 Raw. This was a case of WWE creatively clutching at straws and just trying to reclaim lost glories. It was almost like there was Steve Buscemi with skateboard in hand and backwards cap saying, "How do you do, fellow kids?" Nobody was fooled into thinking this would be a patch on the classic hardcore title of old. That had become a firm favorite right at the tail end of the 90s and into the early 2000s. Mick's own Mankind character ushered the broken and battered hardcore belt in, and then even more comedic workers like Crash Holly took it skyward with the often hilarious 24/7 rule. Now that's what the 24/7 title was based on, obviously, but the joke wore thin almost instantly. Titus O'Neil seemed to win the thing by literally picking it up off the floor, which made the title look worthless instantly. Then Bobby Roode surprised him with a roll-up from behind. Cue Mayhem and cue R-Truth trying desperately to make the best of a bad situation by replicating Holly's work in 2000. Groans were audible when Foley revealed the strap's look as well. It was part garish watch and part biscuit tin lid. Oh, look at it. There. Apparently, somebody had asked to make the title aesthetically pleasing, then accidentally replaced two keywords with bloody ugly before hitting send. Mercifully, Triple H deleted the title from existence in November 2022, but even that moment was a disaster, with Nikki Cross missing the bin. It must never return. They binned it, now burn it. Well, they didn't even bin it. Never mind. Number 46, Braun Strowman's bullying backstory, 2021. Lord only knows what WWE chiefs were thinking when they systematically tried to turn wrecking ball monster Braun Strowman into a sympathetic, put-upon chap who had a heart of gold. Worst of all, they chose Shane McMahon as the ideal guy to bully Braun in 2021. This was a retread of Shane's prior work with Big Show in 2000. Which way did he go and all that? McMahon decreed Strowman a dunce for missing out on Elimination Chamber, then lined up a steel cage match with him at WrestleMania 37 by roundly ripping it in every promo. Shane doctored graphics mocking Braun, then gunged him with silly green goo that looked like something from hit 90s UK children's series Get Your Own Back. If you know, you know. Strowman did get his own back in the cage at Mania, but he played before a popcorn fart of a pop because people just didn't resonate with the story. Bullying is no joke, let's make that really clear. But it simply wasn't believable when Braun stood mid-ring and claimed that he'd been bullied throughout his entire life. You've just been flipping over trucks and destroying everyone in your path since 2016, mate. This character tweet came completely out of the blue, and it wasn't exactly a positive change. It's cool that WWE wanted to rally against bullies and inspire those going through it, but they did so in typically ham-fisted fashion. This was one of the worst bits of casting in pro wrestling history, and that is saying something. You genuinely struggle to find a worse bully than Shane, and a worse victim than Man Mountain Braun Bloody Strowman. What were they thinking? Number 45, JR and Michael Cole's rap battle, 2011. Generally, pro wrestling has struggled to maintain a cool edge in pop culture. Advents like the NWO over in WCW, Steve Austin's rise as a beer-drinking badass, the entire Attitude Era, and others have changed that here or there, but the biz is pretty much a niche loved by hardcore fans and tolerated by some depending on the time of year. That's why so so many folks returned for Royal Rumble/WrestleMania season, or part of the reason, at least. Imagine the horrified glances between industry-adoring hardcores when Jim Ross and Michael Cole had a rap battle on the 12th of December 2011 Raw then. Keep in mind that this was the same year that CM Punk's pipe bomb promo made wrestling seem edgy all over again. Yeah, that was June. By December, WWE had Cole laughing at JR for forgetting his rhymes, as increasingly agitated fans wondered why they'd bought a ticket for the flagship that evening at all. WWE would not be able to charge today's prices for this kind of rotten content, that is for sure. They'd have to offer refunds. The whole exercise appeared to be the latest chapter in an imaginary book penned by Vince McMahon called How to Humiliate Jim Ross in 3,467 Easy Steps. Why else would such a segment exist? To entertain the fans? Yeah, everyone flocked to arenas to see JR become the next Snoop Dogg. Come on now, what are we doing? Painful doesn't even begin to cover it. This would have been agonizing to sit through even if Ross suddenly channeled the spirit of Eminem and laid down one of the best verses in history on Cole's heel character. Actually, no, that would have been pretty awesome, now I'm thinking about it. Number 44, Donald Trump wrestles Rosie ODonnell, 2007. Right, so some of the best to weave comedy into wrestling include The Rock, Kurt Angle, Eddie Guerrero, R-Truth, and even the aforementioned Crash Holly. The worst? WWE's writing teams over the years. They have been responsible for some utterly reprehensible content that should have been binned before it wasted paper by being printed onto format sheets for TV. Case in point, what happened on the 8th of January 2007 Raw? Kicking off the new year with a fake fight between people dressed up as Donald Trump, complete with even less convincing hairpiece, and Rosie ODonnell should have been enough to send someone back to Hollywood on the creative staff. This wasted valuable airtime on WWE's #1 weekly show. It was an abominable bit of business that tanked from beginning to end. Vince McMahon kicked things off by introducing the O'Donnell impersonators Lesbianic Fury. Yep, those were his words. Then WWE set about the task of delighting precisely no one by having the pair of actors roll around working one of the worst matches ever committed to tape. Things were so bad that TNA chants started to ring out around the Scott Trade Center in St. Louis when the Donald cupped his ear like Hulk Hogan or brother. Weirdly, this was actually long before Hulk's reign of terror on TNA had kicked into high gear as a full-time concern, but he had been connected to the upstart promotion by 2007. Nobody in wrestling called for this though, and nobody in wrestling wanted it. On the plus side, at least it wasn't for one of WWE's titles, and you probably won't see Triple H run this sort of segment by wasting time on Netflix now that he's in charge. So let's just forget it ever happened and move on. Okay. Number 43, Suffering Succotash, Son, 2015. Today, Roman Reigns is a smoldering picture of charisma and star power. His change from unwanted babyface to bloodline boss and tribal chief in 2020 revived Roman's fortunes, and there was no turning back. Years of outstanding heel work eventually led to a proper face run that the people demanded. They turned Reigns baby organically because he wasn't forced down their throats as a good guy. Imagine that. In 2015, WWE might as well have had Roman carry a big neon sign that screamed, like me, cheer me, love me, please. Would have been a big sign. Their desperation was too much for most to stomach as the company tried in vain to turn Reigns into the next John Cena. They didn't learn lessons that should have been processed during Cena's rise to the top either, which is why pretty much everyone gagged when Reigns uttered a cringe-inducing line on the 9th of January 2015 SmackDown. Interrupting Seth Rollins, Reigns told his old Shield buddy that he was a sniveling little suck-up sellout full of suffering succotash, son. Then, as if to somehow make things even worse, Roman added, I know, that was not easy to say, then turned to the hard cam and flashed a wink. This attempted fourth wall break was supposed to endear Reigns to the audience by gently poking fun at WWE's writers, but it had become known as a Roman Reigns moment to forget. Probably his worst in a WWE ring? Yeah, maybe. He made the so-called babyface hero look like a complete clown and was regularly used as a stick to beat him with. Someone actually wrote this thinking it'd make Reigns look really, really cool. They were really, really wrong. Number 42, pretended the Big Show was Stephanie's childhood hero, 2013. Insulting your audience's intelligence is never a good idea, but that did not stop WWE from trying it in late 2013 as part of the authorities' ongoing quest to crush spirits of those who hope hoped to see Daniel Bryan become a sustainable main eventer. Ultimately, things panned out for the best on that front, but not before Stephanie McMahon weirdly forgot her own age, or Big Show's age, or something. Steph aimed to get Show on side as an authority heavy by reminding him how much of a hero he'd been to her growing up. And this caused a few eyebrows to raise. After all, Show was born in 1972, and McMahon in 1976. In other words, there was just around 4 years difference between them. It was as though WWE wanted everyone to pretend that Paul White was Andre the Giant or something, a guy who had been around when Stephanie was a toddler hanging off her father's leg backstage in the 1980s. Show didn't even debut as a wrestler until 1995, so this was far-fetched at best and downright insulting at worst. The guy who'd later claim no more BS went along with things though. Show started crying like he was doing his best Ric Flair impression, but his waterworks fell short of the mark. Fans didn't really buy into it because the math wasn't really mathing. When Stephanie was a 6-year-old child behind the curtain at WWF events, Show would have been 10-ish. This logic loophole was never going to be one that WWE could close, and that made Show's tortured good guy act fall flat as a pancake live on air. Well, this was a mess. Number 41, Dean Ambrose gets inoculated, 2018. Right, someone needs to grab an interview with the extra playing a doctor who jabbed Dean Ambrose on the 26th of November 2018 edition of Raw and ask him if he knew he was setting wheels in motion for no less than 4 AEW world title reigns. A huge pop if the doc takes credit for all that all-elite success, and Dino's decision to leave WWE behind for a brave new world under Tony Khan's watch on AEW's first ever pay-per-view. It was a time. Those inoculation spots were the end of the line for Jon Moxley in the E. Yep, that is for sure. On paper, the idea that his Ambrose character wanted to cleanse the product of things he thought were ridiculous had potential. But Vince McMahon went about it in such a cartoonish way. Because of course he did. Dean was literally needled to protect him from germs, and he even started wearing a gas mask to ringside before some matches and segments. Yep, it was too much. Way too much. It is all contextual. Stick mid-90s Jerry Lawler in his stead and you might have got some laughs from the inoculation stuff. Ambrose was never comfortable performing such skits though. They didn't suit his personality, but McMahon would have claimed that fluffing them showed Dean had no range. Now that was not true. The material was just a poor fit for him. Fans were confused by the story that WWE tried to tell as well. It was a sharp left turn from Ambrose ending the Shield's reunion with gritty realism. The inoculation content shoved him out the exit doors and paved the way to happier times in New Japan and during AEW's first few years, and the eventual Death Riders stuff, but maybe let's not focus on that. Just a quick one, hit subscribe and you'll get even more of this great What Culture Wrestling stuff each and every day. Lists, editorials, news, we've got them all. Number 40, Usi Hot burns the Revival, 2019. Contrast and compare how Triple H is working overtime to get Jimmy and Royal Rumble winner Jey Uso over as singles attractions in 2025, to how his father-in-law thought they should be acting as a team in 2019. Oh yes, you knew it was only a matter of time before the year of our Lord 2019 entered the chat, baby. It was a 12-month cavalcade of creative calamities, and that is putting it mildly. Remember Usi Hot? That was part of the Usos' twin attack on the Revival. Jimmy and Jay laughed at the future FTR shaving one another's backs, and both schemed like they were auditioning to be the next Kevin McAllister in some Home Alone reboot produced by WWE's film studios. It was all rather childish, but childish isn't a problem so long as the content is entertaining and leads to something worthwhile. That's the thing, the matches between the Usos and the Revival were always going to be good. It was just everything else in between them that sucked. Usi Hot was a play on words for icy hot, a cream that soothes inflammation before warming muscles to deliver pain relief. Jimmy and Jay had their own version, which did anything but soothe. It made the Revival leap around like they had ants in their pants. Hilarious. This chaos clashed with the serious presentation of hard-fought matches between both teams. The Revival were old-school traditionalists, and the Usos were willing to meet that halfway once the bell sounded. But McMahon and creative wrecked this plan by booking silly skits in between each bout, which was unnecessary. Again, that is putting it mildly. There was nothing mild about Usi Hot though. You get the point, Number 39, Hornswaggles Feud with Chavo Guerrero, 2009. It really took some doing to turn an excellent pro wrestler like Chavo Guerrero into a bumbling clown who starred in the worst segment on Raw every Monday. But WWE's creative team somehow managed to do that in 2009. Apparently, somebody backstage thought that Chavo chasing the diminutive Hornswaggle around like he was in some Looney Tunes cartoon was pulsating wrestling TV. Newsflash, it was a painful chore that barely even qualified as levity on an otherwise serious show. Now that isn't an internet talking bald head just being some miserable git. It's true. It's damn true. Swaggle versus Guerrero satisfied next to nobody as they clashed in everything from boxing matches complete with oversized gloves for Chavo, a Texas bull rope match that had Guerrero dress up as a cow mascot, and a blindfold bout that made Jake Roberts versus Rick Martel from WrestleMania 7 look like the best match in history by comparison. In fairness to both guys, they were trying, so that's something. It certainly wasn't their fault that the creative was putrid, and as a one-off, this might have even worked. But it wasn't a one-off. Nope, WWE kept coming back with more lame comedy week after week after week. They even had some Raw guest hosts dress Mark Henry up as Mark Swaggle for another Chavo pasting. Ugh. The whole thing was a torture-filled waste of precious minutes on the flagship. Comedy wasn't the problem, that can work. Wrestling writers thinking they're penning the next slapstick classic but actually getting more tedious every time they script a new chapter very much was. Number 38, Chad Gable becomes Shorty G, 2019. Back to 2019 we go. But those who recall 2009 clearly shouldn't fret, because we'll be back there soon enough. A decade on from 09's hijinks, Vince McMahon, or a member of his writing staff, had a brainwave. Why not turn hard worker and technical standout Chad Gable into a one-note punchline that doesn't even make any sense? That'll put some butts in the seats and force ratings to skyrocket, or not. Regardless, in one of many duff ideas from WWE in 2019, Gable was turned into the dreary Shorty G. He dressed like a cross between something out of Space Jam and a character from old Disney show Recess. I bloody love that show. I did not love this. Was Shorty there to play basketball? Or did he just forget his PE kit at school and have to wear the school-owned one unfortunate kids who accidentally crapped their pants had to sport? It wasn't really clear, but crap definitely fits on this occasion. Shorty G was that poopy stuff John Cena talked about in 2008. It didn't make sense either. Often, wrestlers who were the same size as Gable or shorter poked fun at his height during backstage promos. Mustafa Ali and the Revival thought it was hilarious that Shorty was so small, even though he wasn't much shorter than the average height, donning an expression that gave away his true feelings on this backstory. Poor Chad had to mumble his way through some nonsense about being bullied his entire life, but never letting that hold him down. It didn't matter that he was literally taller than those doing the bullying. Feel sorry for him and buy the merch, people. People didn't, and no wonder. This was poopy. Number 37, Santino Marella becomes Miss Wrestlemania, 2009. Remember what I said about some people doing comedy actually quite well in WWE? Well, Santino Marella was usually one of those people. His mispronunciations of various wrestler names, like John Cena, had people tittering, and his actions next to the straight-laced Beth Phoenix worked a treat. But sadly, even the best players have at least one bum note to their name. Santino's twin sister, Santina, counts as Marella's worst-of contender. The pesky gimmick just would not go away once Santino introduced it heading into WrestleMania 25. Keen to win the Miss WrestleMania Battle Royal, Marella dressed up as his so-called twin and ended the night with a tiara. This was bargain basement stuff, folks. The kind of dramatic diva rubbish that made it impossible for anybody to take women's wrestling in the company seriously. At least Candice Michelle looked like she was having a great time as she celebrated with Marella. Good for her. Now, right, not to get too po-faced, but right, let's look at the facts for a second. WrestleMania is the biggest platform WWE provides every year. The women's division was already being downplayed by virtue of a stacked Battle Royal field, and now here comes somebody who isn't even part of it to scoop all the glory and turn everything into a lame joke. A man is Miss WrestleMania. Oh, how they laughed. Vince McMahon surely thought this was comedy gold. And normally, when it came to Santino, he was right. Not in the spring of 2009, though. As aforementioned, the Santina gimmick plagued WWE programming and pay-per-view for a while longer. Marella also brought it back to become one of the most random entrance in the 2020 Women's Royal Rumble match. How kind of him. Number 36, Jason Jordan is Kurt Angle's son, 2017. Goosebumps spread like wildfire when news blared out that Kurt Angle had rejoined WWE from TNA in 2017. A Hall of Fame induction was announced. Then Kurt was reintroduced as the new general manager of top brand Raw. Things looked like they were heading in the right direction, but fans desperately crave some more marquee matches like Angle versus Roman Reigns, Angle versus Seth Rollins, or maybe even one last Angle versus Brock Lesnar collision? Exactly none of those happened. Instead, WWE went the soap opera drama route by having commentator Corey Graves tell Kurt that some scandalous news was about to leak about him. Angle said this could ruin his career, and well, he wasn't wrong. Eventually, in July, the Olympian revealed that he had a son, American Alpha's Jason Jordan. Fans were shocked, but not in a happy way. If anything, most wondered if everybody had ingested hallucinogenics at WWE catering. There had to be something funny in the buffet sandwiches because this was rather out there. Look, out there can work, but the whole ordeal was typically half-baked, as opposed to fully baked like the writers, lol. And it fizzled out before anybody could really sink their teeth into things. Look at the guy in the green shirt and cap in this photo here, just look at him, there he is. He just knew that this emotional father and son get-together would turn out to be an absolute clanger. And guess what? It did. Green shirt and cap guy knew his stuff. Jordan was unfortunately forced to retire due to injuries, which isn't WWE's fault. And nobody recalls that Kurt Angle is his kayfabe dad with anything other than an eye roll now. This wasn't actually the worst Kurt Angle moment ever, but we'll get there. More on that later. Number 35, Nicholas is a tag team champion, 28. Fans tuning into WrestleMania every year expect shocking surprises, big title changes, and matches so colossal they bounce off showy event posters and burst into life. Some of the best tag team title moments at Mania include Demolition winning in 1990, the Hardy Boys returning in 2017, and real-life pals Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn headlining opposite the Usos in 2023. Brings a tear to my eye, that last one. Braun Strowman winning the Raw tag straps with a referee's kid. Yeah, that's not gonna bother those timeless moments for the top tag team based spot on future best of WrestleMania lists. That did not bring a tear to my eye. In 2018, at Mania 34, Braun teamed with official John Cone's young lad Nicholas to beat Sheamus and Cesaro. A happy thrill for the Cone family, no doubt, but a tragic one for tag team wrestling in WWE. Ironically, Sheamus and Cesaro were collectively known as The Bar. Strowman and Little Nick winning lowered it. Look, Nicholas likely bragged when he got back to school in front of his classmates, but booking title changes on the biggest pay-per-view of the year just so a 10-year-old boy can boast to his mates in class is hardly a solid reason, right? What did you do over the weekend? Oh, you know, team with Braun Strowman to become one half of the new Raw Tag Team Champions, and I won't be able to make school on Monday because I've got to relinquish them in front of millions on Raw. Family fun or not, this just should not have happened, especially at Mania. Mercifully, Nicholas passively besting workers as good as Sheamus and Cesaro was kept brief, and Braun did all the work really. Still, it was not a great time for the division. Number 34, Bobby Lashley's Three Sisters, 2018. Anyone who has followed pro wrestling for longer than a few years will recall hearing from countless wrestlers that Vince McMahon wanted them to show some personality. In 2018, Bobby Lashley was an unfortunate pet project of McMahon's. Big Bob looked great and he could wrestle fine, but promos weren't a strong suit. Vince aimed to change that by laying it on thick with forced context about Lashley's upbringing. Bobby told Renee Young in sit-down interviews that his three sisters teased and bullied him growing up. That apparently made Lashley into the force to be reckoned with he'd become. Seizing opportunity, then painfully unentertaining heel Sami Zayn brought Bob's three sisters to Raw and asked them to expose every family secret on the 21st of May 2018 episode. Hard to imagine Sami not being entertaining, but yeah, this was the world we lived in. It was painful. Future member of the current AEW roster, Max Caster, played one of the sisters in question. Bit of trivia for you there. You had to stand there and react as Bobby tore the segment to shreds, ironically struggling to show off that personality McMahon badly wanted to squeeze from him. And fans sat on their hands, bored stiff by what they were seeing. It ended up being regarded as one of the worst skits in the show's rich history. Lashley's gentle joking and resultant aggression towards Sami for mocking him fell flat. This backfired on WWE spectacularly. And oh yeah, nobody showed Tony Khan this nightmare on the off chance he thinks putting Caster back out there as Francis would be funny. That is one WWE nod nobody needs to see on episodes of Dynamite in the near future. Horrible stuff. Horrible, horrible. Number 33, Al Wilson's Heart Attack 2003. If you want to laugh, fire up ancient episodes of WWE SmackDown from late 2002 into early 2003 and watch a friend's face as they witness the rise and fall of Al Wilson. It's crazy to think about now, but old Al was one of the most heavily featured characters on the Blue brand for a while. Tori Wilson's dad even got to kayfabe marry Dawn Marie, who was feuding with his daughter. That led to a balmy mother versus daughter match between the pair at the 03 Royal Rumble. Yes, Triple H versus Scott Steiner was only the second worst match that night. Oh, it's true. Seriously though, the stuff with Al was so over the top and daytime soap opera that it almost has a bit of charm to it looking back. Almost is the key word there, because this hoovered up far too much TV time for months. There was never going to be a satisfying payoff either. It wasn't like Al was going to launch a quest to become a WWE full-timer, make a push to become a champion, or even wrestle any matches to speak of. Nah, he was a peripheral butt of commentary jokes until Wilson suffered a worked heart attack brought on by too much sex. Yep, Al's storyline death takes the nod here, but his entire run was a calamitous showcase of everything wrong with Vince McMahon's sensationalistic approach to wrestling. Sometimes it worked if the characters or wrestlers were strong enough, but poor Al Wilson wasn't. He couldn't act, he couldn't do anything physical, and he always looked really awkward in front of the cameras. This doesn't even qualify as a dumb WWE story that nobody wants to admit was genius either. And oh yes, we've done a video for that, you can click on it at some point, maybe now, maybe later, I'm not sure. This was just a storyline to forget. So let's do precisely that now. Done. Number 32, Hiden Reich targets Michael Cole 2004. Not content with stomping all over the legacy of an all-timer tag team, more on that later, Big John Heidenreich liked to recite poetry and physically intimidate others during super cringy backstage skits. Now that wording is what WWE used to describe Heidenreich's bizarre segment with play-by-play man Michael Cole on the 16th of September 2004 SmackDown. Some might explain it away using another term, and you can probably work out which just by looking at the screenshot right here. Heidenreich pinned Lil Michael to a nearby wall, aggressively pushed his own body against Cole's, and started whispering sweet nothings into the mortified commentator's ear. Lord only knows what this was supposed to achieve, or why WWE's creative team thought it'd be wise to turn their new monster into somebody who sexually intimidated others whenever he got the chance. There's no other way to wash this. Heidenreich forced himself on Cole and made it clear he could do anything he pleased with him. Nobody was running to help, but the skit thankfully ended before he could go any further. And incredibly, this wasn't really referenced again for too much longer. Michael went back to announcing like nothing had happened, presumably because WWE higher-ups got bored and didn't see any potential in the story. Why book it in the first place then? This was garbage, shock TV just for the sake of it. Nobody needed this in their lives. Ironically, Heidenreich called his outbursts disaster pieces, and that phrase would perfectly sum up his entire run in the company, to be honest. Number 31, Vince McMahon's last match ever, 2022. Some ego trips should be shot down long before they get a chance to go in front of cameras. In 2022, Vince McMahon needed to be pulled aside and ridiculed for suggesting that he work a match on the biggest weekend of the year. Sadly, McMahon still called the shots in WWE, so no one dared to chastise him for booking himself versus Pat McAfee at WrestleMania 38. This impromptu effort followed Pat's prior match versus Austin Theory. Now that had been boring enough, but McMahon's bout was something else. The soon-to-be disgraced owner of WWE flopped around like a fish, whether he was dishing out punishment to McAfee or taking some himself. Look, Vince was 76 years old when this happened, so he was never going to be prime Kurt Angle out there or anything. That is fair. What isn't fair is that McMahon expected the highest standards from his roster while simultaneously force-feeding this rubbish at Mania. You know, an event series that was supposed to highlight the very best this medium has to offer. McMahon tumbling around before taking one of the worst stunners in history from Steve Austin was the urine-soaked cherry on top of the crap-filled cake cake for his weekend too. Somehow, it was even worse than the one Vince had taken back in 1997. Like, how is that possible? This was a terrifying insight into Vince's mind at the time. Not as terrifying as his Netflix documentary, but terrifying nonetheless. A few behind the curtain probably even told him the bit was funny or helped the show. It didn't, of course. It was bloody brutal, and anybody else putting in a performance so roundly terrible would have been told to pack their things then go home. What a terrible bit of business this was. Number 30, HLA, 2002. So just think about this. Someone, somewhere, actually owns a WWE branded HLA t-shirt. And if they've any sense, they've never worn it out in public. I mean, imagine explaining the context behind that one to some confused non-fans who already think this pro wrestling stuff is a bit silly. Then, imagine being Eric Bischoff, debuting in WWE after years of running it down over on WCW's side, then finding out that hyping up hot lesbian action is part of your job. Yep, we live in a strange world, don't we? Then Raw GM Bish had to feign a smile and champion HLA as something to be proud of in late 2002. Typically insensitive, WWE promoted the idea that lesbian sex, or at least kissing, would happen at Unforgiven that year. What's more, Eric was gonna call rival GM Stephanie McMahon's bluff and see if she'd be cool enough to go through with this live on air. Wait, what? Being coerced into doing anything sexual is definitely never acceptable. But try telling that to Stephanie's father, Vince. He was the one who wrote this hellscape. He used the thought of his own daughter kissing and getting intimate with some hired-in extras or models pretending to be lesbians as a vehicle to push pay-per-view buys. Good lord. The whole HLA thing died a quick death, thankfully, but not before WWE released merchandise for it. Gotta get that merch out. Once they realized that nobody cared, the promotion just moved on to their next bid to shock mainstream media into paying attention. And graphics from Raw with a nameplate that said "The Lesbians" has become stuff of unfortunate legend in years since. Number 29, Retribution want WWE contracts but already have them. 2020. The wrestling landscape was uncertain in 2020. COVID fear gripped the globe, and people fretted about health, work, families, friends, and, well, every single aspect of their lives. I do not miss it, and I'm sure you don't either. On the wrestling side, WWE first retreated behind closed doors at the quaint Performance Center before hiring out empty arenas to act as the Thunderdome setting. If nothing else, at least they're entertaining folks stuck at home. In early August, the Retribution faction debuted on Raw. A group of masked and hooded thugs tore the show apart, then did the same thing on the following episode of SmackDown. It was soon revealed that this was a faction of disillusioned NXT workers who felt that they deserved better treatment on the main roster. Cool, alright, but that's when things started to sag a little. Retribution said they wanted contracts and positions on the WWE roster. One problem, they already had them. They were tied down to deals with the Juggernaut promotion already. So this didn't make a lick of sense. Later, T-Bar said that management gave in to their demands because it was cheaper to sign the stable than pay for new members of security or for all the damage they were causing. Again though, they already had contracts. Why oh why was that such a troubling concept for the creative team to get their heads around when penning material for Retribution? Also, if it was that easy to placate them, then fans had no reason to care about anything the group got up to after they put pen to paper. They'd been bought out. Yeah, simple as that. This saga was definitely one that WWE started without having a middle or end to the story in mind. And it didn't help that Retribution changed from their initial hooded aesthetic to cartoonish masks that made them look like punching bags in some 1980s or 90s arcade beat 'em up. It was all very dumb, this, wasn't it? Number 28, Hiden Reich joins LOD, 2005. Here it is, my friend, Hiden Reich's worst crime. So, Road Warrior Animal needed a partner to wrestle MNM for the tag titles at the Great American Bash 2005. And rather than positioning some hot up-and-comer as a one-off ally for the legend, WWE's writers decided on something else. John Hiden Reich would become a fully fledged member of Legion of Doom doom alongside Animal. LOD 2005 was born, and it was an abomination. Hiden Reich painted his face to reflect his newfound status as the deceased Hawk's replacement, after the newfangled LOD won the belts from Johnny Nitro and Joey Mercury on pay-per-view. But this didn't work or connect with fans. What a surprise. Hiden Reich was released from his contract by January 2006, which meant Animal had to awkwardly stumble around in a rubbish WWE singles run you totally don't remember before he also left the company a few months later. LOD 2005 will go down in history as one of WWE's worst experiments. In truth, they'd already dabbled with the new Road Warriors by having Animal team with Droz in 1998 and 1999, and that hadn't worked either. But at least fans accepted Drozdov to a point. The same could not be said for Big John. Nope, he was a clumsy, uncoordinated powerhouse who lacked necessary fundamentals in ring and on the mic. Longtime fans of the Road Warriors who had followed the team since the NWA days were insulted by the change. And Hiden Reich replacing Hawk was a poor tribute to the fallen original's memory. Not even a spiky color change from red to white could help freshen things up here. It was a disaster. Number 27, Shane McMahon wins the World Cup 2018. Who is the first wrestler that springs to mind when you hear best in the world? Some will answer with a celebrated WWE all-rounder. Others will plump for somebody in AEW or New Japan who works matches that make Dave Meltzer giddy. But everyone can agree on one thing: Shane McMahon would not be on the poll. Nowhere near it. Fans were salty enough about WWE's trips to Saudi Arabia in November 2018 without the disaster of a show Crown Jewel ended up being. Shawn Michaels had one of the worst in-ring returns ever. Triple H tore his pec. Kane's mask and wig combo fell off, and the World Cup tournament tanked. Earlier in the semi-finals, The Miz had beaten Rey Mysterio. That's already bad enough. Injury ruled him out of the final versus Dolph Ziggler though, so none other than Shano stepped in. Less than 3 minutes later, the super sweaty part-time bump taker clutched the giant World Cup trophy like he'd just won the Champions League after extra time and penalties in the Bernabeu against Real Madrid. If you don't know your soccer, that's a big deal. Yes, WWE turned this success into an egotistical heel run for McMahon, but the damage was done. They'd unironically referred to him as the best in the world multiple times on camera. Ring announcers even labored that point like CM Punk was about to stroll down the aisle. Honestly, Dolph or The Miz wouldn't have been a great fit for the World Cup either, but at least both of them could work for longer than 2 minutes without looking like they'd taken a dip in the swimming pool fully clothed. Presenting Shane McMahon as the best wrestler going in 2018 was just laughably bad. He'll follow up or not. Number 26, Hornswaggle is the anonymous Raw GM 2012. It seemed WWE would never tie up a loose end once the anonymous Raw GM gimmick just died out in July 2011. The concept faded without some epic reveal about exactly who was behind those emails that Michael Cole kept reading out. Then, in the summer of 2012, the promotion brought the mysterious laptop idea back for one night only on the July 9th edition of Raw. And that's when Jerry Lawler and Santino Marella, who was playing detective on the whole thing, outed none other than Hornswaggle as the one behind it all. This was inarguably the single worst choice WWE's writers could have made, and it neutered the anonymous GM deal instantly. But somehow that didn't stop them from bringing it back in late 2014. Again, the anonymous flagship authority figure just vanished without a proper explanation, and it was infuriating. Why did they do this? But Swoggle being revealed as the man behind the emails that Cole was reading out was even more annoying. It was a total cop-out, and a clear sign that WWE's creative team hadn't actually mapped out a satisfying conclusion to the story when they put it on television for the first time. Nope, they just winged it and hoped that something would come up later on, and when it didn't, they pinned the thing on Hornswaggle and moved on. Fans groaned collectively as Lawler and Morella's announcement began sinking in. Really? This was what you were going with? All hopes that this would usher in some drastic change for the authority figure trope were dashed. It became a WWE innovation nobody wanted, and things soon returned to normal. Yay. Even Swoggle had to know this was guff. He didn't even do anything for his career. Another massive waste of time, all of this. Number 25, Rusev is a sex addict, 2019. First, some pleasing real-life goodness. Relatively recent wrestling news revealed that wrestling power couple Miro and CJ Perry are back together. The pair rose to fame in WWE's system as Rusev and Lana. They've had their ups and downs on screen and off, but things are back on more positive footing. And good for them. Fingers crossed it works out and both are happy, eh? Speaking of being happy, no one was smiling or happy with the brutal Rusev is a sex addict storyline in 2019. Lana claimed that her then on-screen lover wanted to get intimate everywhere, including inside the big tank at WrestleMania 31. Yeah, that was a detail nobody needed to hear, but WWE had Lana spill all about the fractured couple's lovemaking. Of course, she seemed absolutely horrified by all of this, whilst cavorting in public with new squeeze Bobby Lashley. Figure that one out. WWE briefly flirted with the idea that Rusev didn't mind seeing his wife get freaky with other men. And then there was Liv Morgan and her outburst about falling in love with Lana. The entire story was a twisted mess of half-arsed ideas. The Liv and Lana romance was dropped cold. Then they insinuated that Rusev was a cook. Then he wasn't. See? It was total chaos. My head hurts. Lana told the world that Rusev was controlling and addicted to sex, but he alleged that she was the one with the problem. On and on this went until Miro left the promotion in April 2020 and everything was scrapped. Good riddance to bad rubbish, I say. Number 24, half-heartedly apologized for Raw being crap 2018. There is no point in saying something as broad as Triple H's WWE would never do something like this, because Hunter played his part in the dire segment featured on an unstable 17th of December 2018 Raw. He was right there in the ring next to Vince, Shane, and Stephanie McMahon. All four apologized to fans for how rotten the flagship's creative had become, then vowed to set things right in the new year. Meanwhile, fans who had bought tickets to be there live for this apparently rubbish TV show shuffled around in their seats. They didn't pay hard-earned money to hear the McMahon family half-heartedly say sorry and then blame kayfabe constable Baron Corbin for their own decisions. But that's what the fine folks in Sacramento, California got for their cash. Money not well spent. Vince, Shane, Steph, and Hunter all acknowledged that they hadn't been doing a grand job overseeing the product. However, they knew what needed to be done if WWE was going to get back to its best. 2019 then turned out to be one of the worst years, creatively speaking, for the promotion yet. So the McMahons didn't actually know what needed to be done, did they? What needed to be done was Vince sodding off so WWE actually had some freshness for the first time in years. That eventually happened, of course, but it took some time to get there. Wasting airtime by telling people tuning in that the show they watch every single week is garbage was certainly some call. Honest, sure, but an odd decision when this conversation really needed to take place behind closed doors, not inside the ring to open Raw. Number 23, the infamous ECW Zombie 2006. Both one-night stand events in 2005 and 2006 were sure signs that there was more juice to be squeezed from the ECW brand. Seeing dollar signs and the opportunity to milk it dry, the McMahons ushered in a brand new era for Extreme by debuting a new weekly ECW TV show starting on the 13th of June 2006. And there, WWE's vision for the future of Paul Heyman's renegade outfit would be revealed. A dude dressed up as a zombie wrestled in the very first match on Sci-Fi. That is not a joke. I wish it was. WWE followed a hot segment involving Heyman, Rob Van Dam, Edge, and John Cena with the Zombie versus the Sandman. Their bout went 19 seconds and ended with Sandman caning the hell out of the spooky gimmick before drinking some beers. EC-Dub, EC-Dub. Alarm bells should have been ringing from that moment on that Vince McMahon didn't have ECW's best interests at heart. And before long, his ECW had degenerated into an overlooked C-tier brand behind Raw and SmackDown that had nothing to differentiate it from prior low-level programming like Sunday Night Heat or Velocity. The Zombie had been a sign of things to come then. McMahon's fingerprints were all over this unwanted reroute for Extreme. Fans tripping over themselves to see a weekly version of the one-night stand shows must have known that they weren't getting it once Sandman battered Zombie. This was less hardcore TV and more WWF metal from 2000 than anyone cared to admit. And come the dismal December to Dismember pay-per-view, Heyman's head was in his hands. Better than it being in a dog bowl though, which brings me to number 22, Roman Reigns gets force-fed dog food 2019. Say hi to the angle that forced Roman Reigns to tell WWE creative enough is enough. According to Paul Heyman, Roman was less than thrilled with the writing for his late 2019 feud with Baron Corbin. On the 6th of December SmackDown, things peaked, or dipped. Corbin and pal smeared Reigns in dog food after cuffing him to the ring post, and the show went off the air with a miserable big dog covered in pedigree chum. This banner low for WWE creativity birthed Roman's tribal chief reinvention, so it definitely has a place in the conversation for best, worst moment ever. The entire Bloodline story might never have happened had Baron not emptied some cans of dog meat all over Reigns and ticked the babyface off to the point that he flexed muscles behind the curtain to inspire change. That came next, but in the heat of the moment, the dog food stuff was awful. Worse than awful. WWE got literal with Roman's big dog nickname when they really didn't need to. At one point, Corbin even brought out a mascot dressed as the graphic from Reigns' Tron, complete with ear-hammering, woof-heavy version of his Shield theme. Oh, it haunts my nightmares. This was low-rent fare, but the company clearly hoped it'd make people want to see Roman destroy Baron on the next pay-per-view. As aforementioned, the only get-out clause this storyline has is that it forced a complete shift for Reigns as an on-screen character the next year. He promised never to let himself bow down to the whims of a creative staff who painted in broad strokes again. And he's done alright ever since, hasn't he? Number 21, Brock Lesnar squashes Kofi Mania 2019. Kofi Mania was one of the few highs from WWE's 2019, and it was never even supposed to happen. Kofi Kingston had been a late substitute for the injured Mustafa Ali during a gauntlet bout earlier in the year, and his performance was so strong that even Vince McMahon couldn't deny Kofi a main event run. Remarkably, Kingston went on to beat Daniel Bryan for the WWE title at WrestleMania 35, and everyone was chuffed to bits for the guy. I mean, how could you not be? A so-so title reign ensued, but nobody was too bothered really. After all, WWE had listened for a change. They'd let an organic push take shape like it was Bryan in 2013-2014 all over again. Then McMahon reminded his consumer base who was really in charge by having Brock Lesnar wreck Kofi in seconds to become the brand new champ. Boo. That squash occurred during SmackDown's debut episode on Fox in October. At once, Kofi was made to look like some out-of-his-depth scrub against the might of Lesnar. Then WWE debuted ex-UFC mauler Cain Velasquez as a would-be foe for Brock. This was a rapid-fire 1-2 punch of, we didn't want that, or that for fans. Again, McMahon was conditioning his audience to go along with his pushes, not ones they wanted to see. And it was counterproductive. Kingston dropping the title wasn't the issue, but jobbing him out like SD Jones against King Kong Bundy when he'd soared to the highest of highs earlier in 2019 was just plain cruel. Some shock thumpings are worthwhile, but this was not one of them. Kofi deserved better. What a stupid piece of booking. Number 20, Zombie Lumberjack Match 2021. More zombies incoming, yay. Damian Priest vs. The Miz was a tie-in with the Netflix movie Army of the Dead. That starred Batista. But WWE's Zombie Lumberjack match at WrestleMania Backlash 2021 starred another old favorite. Scotty 2 Hottie was in the house. Oh yeah. And he cosplayed a brain-devouring member of the undead cast who surrounded the ring and tried to tear flesh from Priest and Miz. It was hokey, yes, but hokey has worked in the past. This didn't though. It really didn't. It was just too much for fans watching at home to deal with when announcers hit out with ludicrous statements about zombie lumberjacks on patrol, or when Priest and Miz fended the undead horde off with simple kicks and punches. That easy, is it? This was like a video game, not a pro wrestling match, but things got worse come the finish. The zombies, who had respected the invisible barrier wrestling so loves to pretend that each ring has, waited patiently until Priest had pinned Miz before entering and devouring the heel. Yet they ate him alive. As if realizing the silliness of their own booking, WWE then had Miz show back up on TV a week or so later with barely a scratch on his body. Hey, it turns out being Being gnawed to death by a pack of zombies is no worse than being licked clean by an eager litter of cute puppies. WWE made money from the Army of the Dead product placement, but they didn't need to go to these lengths to promote it, surely. A trailer would have sufficed, no? Or maybe they could have brought the old ECW Zombie out of retirement and had Steve Austin just hit a stunner on him. Anything would have been better than what was served up here. Maybe want to chew my own face off this. Number 19, Mae Young gives birth to a hand, 2000. I really hope nobody's eating a nice bowl of jelly whilst watching this video. If so, I do apologize. And let me know what flavor you're devouring in the comments below. The 28th of February 2000 Raw will forever be remembered as the night when Mae Young gave birth to a human hand. Mark Henry's face told the full story. Sexual Chocolate could not believe how gross the ordeal was. But he really should have been wondering how he managed to impregnate a prosthetic hand into Mae. Yes, that is a real sentence and there's no going back now. Being honest, the romance between Mark and Mae had some comedic value. Not much, but some. It was an undercard story designed to push Henry's anyone will do approach in the bedroom. And that's fine and dandy. But did anybody really need to see Young squeeze out a jelly-covered hand as the poor extra enlisted to play doctor tried his best not to gag? No, they did not. Over on the other channel, WCW ran matches like The Stro versus The Cat, and Sid Vicious retaining the world title over Tank Abbott. I mean, they could have put on a rematch between Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat, it didn't really matter. The promotion was cooked, so Nitro was still blasted in the Monday night ratings by Mae's slapstick pregnancy. How embarrassing. Number 18, the NWO helps Sting, and then he loses anyway. 2015. Now, Sting did have a cup of coffee in the NWO as a red and black version of his Crow character over in WCW, but he's best remembered as the main protagonist fighting against the New World Order menace. WWE didn't care one bit about honoring that though. They had to cram in some distractions for WrestleMania 31's battle between the Stinger and staunch WWE loyalist Triple H. He'd save the day against WCW incomer Sting a full 14 years after World Championship Wrestling had gone out of business. Nope, the story leading into this Mania scrap did not make much logical sense. People were willing to roll with it just to see Sting work inside a WWE ring though. Then the actual match happened and it was a slow, ponderous affair with a truly baffling conclusion. Stinger staring at the lights and looking like a loser during his very first match in the promotion was bad enough. But then there was the tacked-on NWO spot. Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall wandered out to have their old WCW enemies back against a dude everybody knew the Outsiders were good friends with. Huh? Then their efforts proved fruitless as Sting just lost to Hunter anyway. Double huh? All the hers. Ha! I'm gonna stop. WWE wanted to put as many iconic names out there as possible, and that's understandable. But it isn't much to ask that the formatting adds up, or that a legendary wrestler like Sting gets to look strong when he's a hot new ticket in the company's main event scene. This creative spat on Stinger and his history with the NWO in one fell swoop. WWE didn't give a damn, clearly. Everybody was dead wrong about Sting being finished once he got to AEW at least. He went on to have a run that almost makes you forget about this mess. Almost. Number 17, The Ring beats Finn Balor's Demon, 2021. It's a general rule of thumb that pretty much everybody has to lose or show weakness at some stage in their careers. Kurt Angle reportedly couldn't wrap his brain around that years before signing with WWE, and WCW struggled to find a suitable way to have Bill Goldberg do the honors elsewhere. Now, some characters or gimmicks should be protected properly, but finding solutions without booking yourself into a corner is a must. Somebody needed to remind WWE of that heading into Extreme Rules 2021. They wanted to put all-conquering tribal chief Roman Reigns up against Finn Balor's demon guys on the PLE, but no one could concoct a finish that would both give Roman the win and protect Balor's offshoot. So they went with the worst plan imaginable. Wonderful. Finn began convulsing on the floor at ringside like a fish as the lights flickered. Then he got a second wind and looked ready to take Reigns out. What happened next? Did Roman move and shut Balor down through skill? Did another fresh supernatural gimmick debut to cut the demon off? Nope. The turnbuckle broke, the top rope fell, Finn landed flat on his face, then Reigns just beat him. That was it. And that was a wrap on the demon as an unstoppable attraction. One accidental ring breakage and a solitary spear was all it took to take him out. There was no going back for Finn's alter ego after this. It was even a talking point nearly 2 years later when Balor went up against Edge inside Hell in a Cell at WrestleMania 39. This finish should never have been put on air. Never ever. I'll never get that flopping fish out of my brain. Number 6, Goldberg squashes The Fiend 2020. Everything about this scenario felt like a nightmare that fans were just about to wake up from. 1, there wasn't much demand to see Goldberg win another world title in 2020. 2, Bray Wyatt's Fiend persona needed some protection from a writing squad that could not be trusted. And 3, their match was taking place over in Saudi Arabia. Those shows were still amongst the least essential on WWE's calendar every time they rolled around, because fans knew the main events were gonna absolutely suck. Bouts like Goldberg versus The Undertaker, DX versus Brothers of Destruction, and the so-called Greatest Royal Rumble, which was anything but, had been rejected by the masses. At best, they were necessary evils for the creative team. Just events to get through so they could get back to business as usual on the weeklies. But Bray losing to Goldberg in just over 3 minutes was one of the worst Saudi plots yet. The Fiend was practically shattered into pieces so Bill could hold the Universal title prize heading into WrestleMania 36. Perhaps worst of all, Goldberg's planned match versus Roman Reigns for the big pay-per-view didn't even end up happening come crunch time. COVID forced a reshuffle, which meant former Wyatt soldier Braun Strowman won the belt inside the Performance Center. Still such a surreal sight. Look, if one's being kind, you could point to the ridiculously fun Firefly Funhouse cinematic match between Bray and John Cena as an upside. What a wild ride that was. But it sure didn't feel like positivity was in the air when Wyatt's alter ego fell to the man in Saudi. What a dumb decision. One of many that the Fiend character suffered through, unfortunately. Number 15, squashing Nexus flat, 2010. The Retribution faction, studied earlier, wanted to be an even edgier Nexus. But it failed. It failed big time. In the summer of 2010, NXT rookies banded together to take the fight to established stars in one of the biggest holy S-word moments in WWE Raw history. Wade Barrett led the charge, and the group carved out a respectable spot on cards for guys like Heath Slater, Justin Gabriel, and David Otunga. It also threatened to turn the well-spoken Barrett into a headline WWE name. But John Cena said screw that. Cena's biggest fans won't want to talk about this now, but John reportedly used his backstage influence to smash the Nexus threat into smithereens at SummerSlam 2010. Both Edge and Chris Jericho spoke out against it, but Cena thought the heel team should do the honors for Team WWE and like it. Okay, fair enough. But there was a better way to go about that than making them look like outgunned enhancement workers lucky to main event on pay-per-view. Daniel Bryan, who had been legit fired, then brought back following a controversial choking angle with ring announcer Justin Roberts, was a surprise member on the babyface side. That got a big ol' pop. The match started hot, but Nexus members Darren Young and Michael Tarver were gone within minutes. Things settled into a back and forth groove of eliminations before Cena's ego ran wild, brother. He pinned Gabriel and submitted Barrett within 30 seconds to close out the match later on. Nexus was soundly thrashed when they really needed to look dominant and like a real threat. Edge and Jericho were right with this one. This was thick and short-sighted from Cena and WWE. Months of potential matches were flushed right down the drain. Just like that. Number 14, Kurt Angle's dreadful retirement match 2019. What a disgrace. Kurt Angle took to pro wrestling like a duck to water when he traded Olympic success for sports entertainment in the late 90s. By the end of 2000, Angle had already claimed the WWF title and secured his seat at the head of the table as a reliable headliner. It was a meteoric rise, one peppered with countless excellent matches, comedy flourishes, and more. Kurt was the man, folks, and the fun kept going once he joined TNA in 2006. There was a lot of fanfare for Angle's WWE comeback in 2017. The company honored him with a Hall of Fame induction, then kept him busy as an on-screen character whilst everyone figured out if the man was physically fit enough to work some marquee matches. Now that side of things was spotty at best, because Kurt's body was failing, but the way he bowed out was humiliating for somebody so world-class and important. WWE put Angle in a nothing match versus Baron Corbin at WrestleMania 35. Their bout went approximately 6 minutes and was sandwiched in between a Triple H versus Batista no-holds-barred clash and an Intercontinental title scrap pitting Finn Balor versus Bobby Lashley. Yep, I forgot about the latter one too. Creative spared Kurt the death spot right before the main event, but he went out 14th on a 16-match card and felt totally rudderless. A 16-match card, thank God for 2 Night Manias. Corbin won without Angle putting up much of a fight. Then the celebrated Olympic hero waved to the crowd before disappearing. That right there was all Kurt got for years of classic matches, working through broken necks and more. Few icons as mighty as him have been treated so poorly. Again, what a disgrace. Number 13, Piggy James, 2009. Michelle McCool was apologetic and uncomfortable with the material WWE handed her, but both she and Lay Cool partner Layla had a job to do. They were bratty, stuck-up heels, the sort who'd pick holes in their opponents any which way they could. In that respect, bullying Mickie James for her appearance wasn't something new to the business. However, something personal was going on behind the scenes that made this storyline unsavory. WWE chiefs believe Mickie had put on weight and wasn't taking care of herself. In other words, she wasn't starved half to death or stick thin like they thought she should be as a diva. James looked healthy and was certainly in better shape than most human beings walking the planet on her worst day. But that didn't stop the writers from coming up with the dire Piggy James angle, so they could needle Mickie and embarrass her in public. James has been professional when talking about this in years since, but she still thinks it was crappy and was hurt by the story at the time. And behind the curtain, McCool and Layla repeatedly said sorry to their peer for body shaming her on episodes of SmackDown. The story was mean-spirited and reflected bonkers thoughts backstage amongst some. Like, were they blind? But it was also clumsily told in front of the cameras. Fans did not take to the storyline at all, and no amount of comeuppance for Laycool could change that. Look, pro wrestlers know that they're putting themselves out there in front of the world, but the least they should expect is some backing from the folks in charge of guiding their careers. This was just bullying. Number 12, chipped away at HBK's legacy, 2018. Or should that subtitle be Let HBK Chip Away at His Own Legacy? Yeah, that probably works better. Money talks, folks. And Shawn Michaels had ears like Roald Dahl's BFG once WWE began talking terms heading into Crown Jewel 2018. The legend had retired from the ring in 2010, and he vowed never to come back. In fact, Shawn even reportedly knocked back potential bouts versus Daniel Bryan and AJ Styles. That made it hard to forgive his return over in Saudi Arabia. Like, you didn't want to come back for them, but you came back for this? Listen, everybody knew that Michaels was doing this for the payday, but people could live with someone running towards a staggering pot of cash. What fans struggled with was the dearth of quality once HBK stepped between the ropes for a tag bout with Triple H versus Kane and The Undertaker. They had a shocking match that everyone involved would come to regret. Hunter tore his pec mere minutes in. Kane's wig and mask combo slipped off his head. The quartet stumbled through more uncoordinated spots than anyone would care to admit, and Michaels just looked like a pale shadow of his former self. He hadn't wrestled in 8 years and had visibly aged, so yeah, fair enough, but no one was prepared for something this outrageously crap. It's just as well Shawn has restored some of his honor by working his socks off as chief of NXT, because leaving WWE life on this sour note would have been ghastly. Number 11, WCW star DDP is a a stalker. 2001. Most of WCW's biggest stars sat at home collecting fat payoffs from their AOL/Time Warner contracts once the company dissolved in 2001. The WWF wanted to bring in names like Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Goldberg, Ric Flair, and others, but they had guaranteed deals that Vince McMahon wasn't willing to match. The only main eventers to come over initially were Booker T and Diamond Dallas Page. Page reportedly agreed to a mutual cut of his WCW payments so he could get started in the Federation for less money. But in hindsight, he likely wishes he hadn't. The soon-to-be WWE brought DDP in as a creepy stalker who'd been following The Undertaker's wife Sarah around. There was a monster pop when Page took his hood off on Raw in the summer, but enthusiasm quickly died once everybody realized the WWF had turned WCW's People's Champion into a vile predator. This was a gross miscalculation of DDP's popularity. It seemed like McMahon believed his audience wouldn't have a clue who Page was or what he was about. He was so very wrong. WWF fans wanted to cheer for Dallas, but he'd been placed in the stalker role, and that was not going to change until the invasion angle was close to finishing up. Taker treated Page like a lowly jobber whenever he was in the ring with him too, which did not help matters. DDP definitely was not rewarded for taking less cents on the dollar to tear up his AOL/Time Warner contract and sign his name on a WWF one. His entire WWF/WWE career turned out to be a huge waste of time and nowhere close to his WCW stint. It was a major bummer. Poor DDP. Number 10, Hell in a Cell 2019's referee stoppage. 2019. There was a time when Hell in a Cell stood out as WWE's top match type. Ask any number of fans what bout should end blood feuds and they would probably answer Hell in a Cell. Ask many more which match they could not wait to play in the latest company video game. And the call would come again. Hell in a Cell. I used to love chucking folks off that thing. The tanked up cage structure was once the choice of the gimmick match connoisseur. It still kinda is, despite many years of rather humdrum pay-per-views that numbed an audience once excited by the mere mention of Hell in a Cell. CM Punk and Drew McIntyre take a ton of credit for rescuing the gimmick with their blistering showing at Bad Blood 2024. In 2019 though, precisely nobody was gushing with the same sort of praise for Seth Rollins versus Bray Wyatt's Fiend. Their Cell encounter had some sneakily great build. Seth visiting the Firefly Funhouse was quirky and a bit unique. But then the show rolled around and WWE's infinite wisdom ruined everything. Creative deemed it necessary that Rollins and Wyatt go to a referee stoppage due to excessive violence. Unfortunately for them, the violence wasn't excessive. Fans had witnessed a lot worse in prior Hell in a Cell matches over the years. I mean, Mick Foley being thrown off the damn thing, for example, and Rollins pelting Bray with some weapons was just never gonna cut it. The extremely annoyed live crowd booed the finish, and Seth later admitted he was so fired up about the embarrassment of it all that he wanted to strangle Vince McMahon once he returned back behind the curtain afterwards. In fact, the ending was so rotten that WWE announced a match can't be stopped for any reason stipulation for the Falls Count Anywhere rematch at Crown Jewel. It was pretty much their way of saying we promise we won't be that stupid again. Number 9, The Misery of Kerwin White, 2005. Chavo Guerrero's Kerwin White gimmick could have actually been worse. Much, much worse. Chavo told Chris Van Vliet in 2020 that he pitched coming out in front of fans dressed as a member of racist white supremacist group the Ku Klux Klan whilst playing the character. Vince McMahon loved it. Shocking, I know. And both agreed that it'd be a real throwback to days when wrestlers would do anything to garner heat. But thankfully, Kerwin in the KKK didn't make it to TV, because that would have been truly appalling. Guerrero's new guise was foul enough. He made racist remarks about other skin colors and demographics during various vignettes and promos in 2005, and was generally cast as somebody who hated anyone who wasn't white. Obviously, Chavo had Hispanic heritage, so he was trying to palm the whole thing off as was ridiculous and a joke for telly. But pitching to come out dressed in a white sheet as a member of a racist group? Yeah, that's too far, and would have earned him a top 5 spot on this list. It took a depressing real-life incident to cancel the Kerwin White idea. Chavo's uncle Eddie sadly passed away in November 2005, and so Guerrero returned to his real self in a bid to honor fallen family. The circumstances really sucked, but nobody was sad to see Kerwin get the boot and Chavo come back. And surely Guerrero would have regretted going too far with the whole white is right persona WWE had him playing. There are much better ways to get heat than by sinking to such a low, and race baiting to the extreme. Kerwin White was a miserable idea from start to finish. Good riddance. Number 8, Vince McMahon ridicules JR's Bell's palsy, 2012. The image that you can see right here perhaps sums up Vince McMahon's attitude towards Jim Ross, an iconic announcer who thrilled millions from behind the desk on TV. Ross was also hardworking and switched on in the office. He was a credit to WWE and extremely loyal, but McMahon could not resist the urge to bully or ridicule JR whenever he had the chance. On the 11th of June 2012 Raw, Vince encouraged Hornswaggle to do his best impression of Jim. Then he took over and contorted his face before barking Ross's familiar "Stone Cold, Stone Cold, Stone Cold" refrain. Mocking his commentary style and friendship with Steve Austin wasn't the problem here, but twisting his face to make light of JR's health battles with Bell's palsy was another story entirely. It was also confusing, because McMahon would go on to personally pen a letter to Ross encouraging him and letting him know that he was welcome in WWE. Well, which one was it? He was either a punching bag ripe to be degraded on television, or a valued employee who had a lot left to offer. It couldn't be both, but welcome to the mind of Vince McMahon. Actually, no, let's stay out of that. Apparently, some within WWE thought that McMahon had stepped over the line by poking fun at JR's Bell's palsy. Both Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara had rightly taken a lot of flack for doing the same thing years earlier in WCW, but neither of them had the close, lengthy relationship that Vince did with Ross. He was just being an arsehole here. Number 7, Kurt Angle wants bestiality sex, 2005. Pop quiz time. What is worse than Kurt Angle bowing out in a naff retirement loss to Baron Corbin? Kurt Angle stalking Booker T's wife Sharmell and saying that he wants bestiality sex with her, of course. Yep, here we go. That 2005 plot point was highly unnecessary, and it had to be more than a tad uncomfortable for everyone involved. Sure, these people are professionals and get what WWE's brand of entertainment is, but I mean, come on. The words bestiality sex have no place in a wrestling promo. Ever. Bestiality is when a human being engages in sexual activity with an animal, if you didn't know. And if that was you, then I'm sorry. Now you know, and you probably wish you didn't. Basically, Angle was calling Sharmell an animal to degrade her, and WWE's writers weren't finished with the preposterous claims. They'd go on to have Kurt allege that Sharmell fondled his private parts when Booker wasn't around. Book beat Kurt at Judgment Day 05, then again on an episode of SmackDown in June to close out their feud. It had been an unsatisfying one, rife with awkward encounters, claims of sexual harassment, and more. It's also pretty poor that this turned out to be one of Angle's final major storylines before leaving WWE and heading to TNA. A few years later, Kurt and Booker were in the main event Mafia together, and most had forgotten all the bestiality sex chat from their WWE days, and that's probably for the best. Let's just assume that this is one story that Angle would really rather leave in the past. Yeah, it's the kind of thing that would make wrestling fans cringe if they stumbled upon it today. Number 6, Trish Stratus barks like a dog, 2001. The awesome Trish Stratus was a rarity in women's wrestling long before she became a legend. She knew her role as an eye candy diva when she first arrived on the scene in 2000, but Trish quickly developed an undying need to prove that the women could wrestle just as good as the men. She, along with Lita and obviously Chyna, helped shift some perceptions around what females were capable of in WWF/WWE. The 5th of March 2001 episode of Raw featured a salty segment that hardly anyone looks back on fondly though. An irate Mr. McMahon bullied Stratus into stripping down to her underwear, crawling around the ring, and literally barking like a dog. This was all done with comeuppance at WrestleMania X7 happen in mind, but it was just another example of Vince booking himself in sexually suggestive situations with female talent. That's become a distressing thought due to allegations of sexual misconduct from former WWE employee Janelle Grant more recently. That scandal has put a scathing light on some of McMahon's behavior as company figurehead for decades. And it doesn't exactly paint segments like the one with Trish in a good light. Comeuppance or otherwise, this was an exploitative, demeaning skit that played before lots of macho whooping and hollering. Vince and some of his audience got a twisted thrill out of degrading Stratus here. She's pointed out that she was only playing a TV character and knew the story going in, and fair enough, I guess. But that still won't change the segment from being viewed unfavorably by a lot of people given more recent real-life events. Number 5, referee Tim White attempts suicide, 2005. Armageddon 2005 wasn't the most memorable pay-per-view, but those not in the know should definitely go out of their way to check out a top Hell in a Cell headliner between Randy Orton and The Undertaker. It was good stuff. Another match worth seeing was Chris Benoit versus Booker T, if you can sit through the former's matches today after all the horrendous stuff that I don't really need to get into here. And there was a tiny cruiserweight title showdown between Kid Cash and Juventud Guerrera too. But yeah, that's about it for the SmackDown special. WWE dangled another carrot in front of fans ordering the show though, a live suicide. That is not a sick joke. Referee Tim White had been injured during an earlier Cell clash between Triple H and Chris Jericho at Judgment Day 2002. He tried to make a return to reffing in 2004, but re-injured his shoulder and had to step away. In storyline, and surely a bit in reality too, White was depressed about the whole thing. Then his TV character decided to end it all and grabbed a shotgun as backstage interviewer Josh Matthews looked on aghast. The gun fired off screen, so WWE had an out here, but backlash for the skit flooded in immediately. Some thought it was distasteful regardless of circumstances, and others couldn't believe that the promotion had done something like this so soon after Eddie Guerrero's untimely death a month or so earlier. Explaining, WWE said that White had only managed to shoot his foot at Armageddon. This led to several other suicide bids, including ingesting rat poison and Tim attempting to hang himself. And to make things even more insensitive, WWE uploaded these segments to their official website with the title Lunchtime Suicide. Yikes. Just a quick side note, White worked for WWE on and off behind the scenes up until his own passing in 2022, and he was an immensely popular figure amongst wrestlers. Number 4, airing Muhammad Hassan's Undertaker attack, 2005. What a year that was. The grim controversies of WWE keep on coming with the curious career of Muhammad Hassan, and that might be putting it mildly. Hassan was a deliberately polarizing kind of character who existed exclusively to feed off rising tensions towards Muslims and indeed Arab Americans living in the United States following the 9/11 attacks in 2001. Muhammad debuted on screen in late 2004, and his promos were laced with race baiting and claims of prejudice because of his background. WWE knew they were already pushing some sensitive buttons with the gimmick to begin with, but then a shocking real-world incident changed everything. The London bombings on the 7th of July 2005 left everyone stunned and terrified. On the 4th of July, WWE taped an angle that saw several hooded men choke out and then carry The Undertaker away, but that didn't air on television until the 7th of July. Oh dear would not begin to cover the enormity of this, my friends. This was bad. WWE managed to remove this segment from the UK and European broadcasts, but it aired on UPN in the States and on The Score in Canada. Several messages flashed up on screen warning fans that they might find some of the show unsettling or offensive, but this angle really should have been cut from the show worldwide once news of the bombing started to spread. Bruce Pritchard would go on to claim that WWE and UPN didn't have time to make necessary adjustments. Look, nobody's trying to point a direct finger of blame in one direction here, but something had to be done, right? And then Hassan just vanished from WWE programming following the Great American Bash on the 24th of July. Essentially, through no fault of his own, Hassan's career was stolen from him. We've actually got a video about other stars who had their careers stolen from them that you should definitely check out after this one. Number 3, Eddie's in Hell, 2006. Angles piggybacking on someone's death are often defended with statements like, "But that's what wrestler A would have wanted." Now, sometimes this is probably true, but nobody will ever know for sure because those workers are no longer around to share their thoughts. This happened when CM Punk interrupted The Undertaker mid-Paul Bearer tribute in 2013, and it had happened before once Eddie Guerrero passed in 2005. WWE squeezed a lot out of memorializing Eddie. Chavo Guerrero returned from Kerwin White hell to pay tribute. Rey Mysterio honored his friend whenever he could, and various wrestlers began using trademark Eddie moves during their matches. And that was all positive stuff, but everyone should be ashamed of the 3rd of February 2006 episode of SmackDown. There, a heel Randy Orton quizzed Mysterio on his fondness for bringing Guerrero up, or blowing a kiss towards the sky whenever he appeared on screen. Fans looked on, stunned, as Randy then told Rey, Eddie ain't in heaven, Eddie's down there, in hell. For the record, this happened a mere 82 days after Guerrero had passed away, and it had been even less time since his funeral. Orton and Mysterio were set to do battle on the upcoming No Way Out pay-per-view, so they needed something spicy to help sell their #1 contendership match. But literally anything other than suggesting that a fallen friend who had died months before was in purgatory would have done the trick. At best, this was too soon. Way too soon. It caught everyone off guard. And then the cries of, but Eddie would want it this way started. Really? I don't know. Number 2, the Katie Vick saga, 2002. 2002 saw WWE produce hot lesbian action for the masses in a bid to up ratings and generate scandalous interest. And the infamous Katie Vick saga was another story drummed up with that same salaciousness in mind. However, wrestling fans likely never thought they'd be hearing necrophilia discussed on episodes of flagship show Raw every other Monday. Yep, but here we were. Triple H dished some alleged dirt on his rival Kane by changing the masked man's backstory to include drink driving, a previously functioning childhood/adolescence, and the aforementioned necrophilia. The game explained that Kane had agreed to drive a girl called Katie Vick home one night, but did so under the influence, crashed, and killed her. And instead of showing remorse, the Big Red Machine then had sex with the corpse. Right. WWE booked a mock skit showing Triple H's funeral home send-up of this clearly false accusation. However, Kane didn't really do much to dispel rumors that he'd killed Katie or interfered with her body post-death. This was also weird, because it was like the company planned to turn Kane into a sympathetic drink driver who had sex with a dead body rather than calling an ambulance or the police. And it wouldn't be the last time that creative mucked around with Kane's convoluted backstory. The Undertaker and Paul Bearer once spoke of Kane being burned in fires set by Taker, and spending most of his formative years locked away. Apparently not, though. Apparently Big Crispy was going on dates like any other teenager and then getting up to God knows what when things went wrong. Utterly deplorable creative, and one of the most infamous WWE ruthless aggression controversies. But that's not the last you'll see of Kane on this list. Oh no. Number 1, casting Kane as a babyface R-word, 2004. Right, get this if you can. It's easy to show sympathy for wrestling's best babyfaces when they're in trouble, but how could anyone be expected to sympathize with someone who forcibly impregnated somebody else and then cried once they miscarried the baby? WWE thought that'd fly for Kane back in 2004. He effectively assaulted Lita, then shed tears when he accidentally fell on her mid-angle with Gene Snitsky and killed his own child. Good grief, this is very grim to talk about, isn't it? Someone in WWE's creative meeting seriously thought they could semi-turn Kane babyface by presenting him as a grieving would-be father. Meanwhile, a disassociating Lita lay next to him in a hospital bed wondering how she had ended up in this spot. Matt Hardy, who had a lot more real-life drama coming his way, was also included in the story leading up to the Kane is Daddy announcement. Honestly, what were they thinking with all of this? It was daytime soap opera fare turned sour. It was impossible to feel anything other than disgusted by WWE storytelling. And that was before they tried to heap a spoonful of sympathy onto Kane. He was a monster, and then he fell on Lita, and everyone was supposed to get cut up about it? What? The biggest story beats in the tale were just all wrong. Even if you somehow don't personally agree that this is the worst thing WWE has done in the 21st century to date, you must relent that it just did not need to happen. Please never do anything like this again, powers that be. Please. If you found this massive list interesting, well, there's more where that came from over at What Culture Wrestling, my friend. Check out this 50 worst WCW moments ever video too. It's a great time, I promise. Bye bye.